So you will want to open, again in Moodle, so if you weren't here to do the image correction for Rock 2, so go ahead and open that. And it looks sort of kind of like this one. If you were here on Thursday, I'll Control plus to zoom in. We removed a little stick right there, which isn't a big deal, but if you needed to remove the stick. And then we were going to continue practice on working with the clone stamp, and you just get better and better, and it's super good for removing elements within a photograph. You may have a really good photograph, but you might need to remove power lines, or maybe somebody's hand is out in the way, some kid in the background was running around. I mean, whatever makes that photograph could make it, I guess, better for your purposes. The clone stamp is really helpful for editing a little bit. So go ahead and zoom in, open up Rock 2, and I'm doing a Control plus again so that you can zoom into that corner. You just want to see right here. What we'll end up doing, the rock is going to be pretty easy to correct. So what I'm going to do is make the rock, I'm going to continue the rock on down. This is a little more difficult. So if I have to replicate the shadow and replicate the grass. There's not a lot of grass. I mean, I've got more grass here, but is that the same color exactly as here? I'm kind of afraid it's not. So I think the grass, you're going to find that you might see some appearance of duplication just because of this image. And then the shadow is a little bit more difficult to grab, but the rock, I think you'll be really pleased with that part of it. So the clone stamp is, again, the same tool that we used last time. And you just want to pick the regular old clone stamp. Clone stamp has a brush size, as we've learned already from prior dealings with the clone stamp tool. You want to have the clone stamp tool large enough to do your job. If I had a 20 pixel, as I have right now, brush, it's not large enough really to copy a whole lot of the rock. So I need to increase that. And again, where you increase it, I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule, but I'm probably going to be somewhere between 60 and 70 as a guess. Is a rock hard 100% or soft 0%? Do you think a rock should have a hard appearance or cloud-like appearance? Hard appearance, yep. So you can probably get close to the 100%, if not 100%. And you know, a little bit less would be fine too, but that's not a super clean photo. I mean, it's, you know, these are old photos from my old Olympus, but they work. They've got stuff we need to correct. Opacity, I do want to correct 100% of the color at 100% flow. So I don't want to see any of the stuff behind it. So make sure you have that. And then this is just like we did with the other tool. And again, if you feel like you need to change the brush size, so maybe I'm okay with the 70 here, but when I start copying and, you know, painting over in this other section, I might actually feel like my brush is too large. So at this point, I might want to start, you know, at this kind of edge here. And again, you alt key and then click, and then you can kind of match up. So I'm not even clicking and dragging down yet. You can do a single click if you need to, or you can try clicking and dragging. But the goal is to kind of match it up, and it should sort of kind of copy down. And it may only go so far before you need to alt click again, and then do the same thing and match that up. So then I feel like my brush is maybe a little bit too big for the other parts of the rock. So again, I can kind of click and drag around other sections to make it look a little different.
What tool is this you're using?
It's the clone stamp, and it is right here. So it's a plain old clone stamp tool.
And what size brush did you have on it again?
I've had a couple of different sizes, so I'm at about 50, so 50 to 70, I think. I used a larger one on the right-hand side, smaller one here. I think you could even go a little bit smaller, but again, your goal is to make it kind of look like a rock. And you may copy and paste it's a copy from another area and pasting to another area is really kind of what it is. So the alt click is, and you might see the plus sign, remember, as you're kind of clicking and dragging. So you're borrowing pixels from where the plus sign's at, painting the pixels where you click and drag. So for example, and I might make my brush size maybe again, you know, on the 50 something, 60, something like that for the grass. So if I want to borrow this grass and paint down, then I want to Alt and click somewhere where the pixels are good to go. And then I can just click and drag down for a little bit. I can't go very far because it remembers that the canvas is there, and pretty soon you're painting the canvas. So again, you have to kind of Alt click in various areas. And this one is a little tougher to make it look like you're not, you know, this new pixels here. And then to try to borrow from, you know, areas where the shadow connects is even harder. Near the rock, it's a little bit harder because of the shadow. And then you want to just see that it kind of looks like you've gotten rid of the canvas part. So this does look like it's a little bit more copied because there's not a lot of it to help us out with, but not bad along, you know, along there. The rock, I think, is pretty easy to try to find other locations to duplicate from. Okay, so let's make a new document. Let's go about, so file new at the top, Control N, but file new. And let's say, so we're going to do a custom, let's say we want a width. We're going to collage some things, so I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Let's do a width of about 1600 and a height of about 800. 96 pixels per inch is fine. The white background is fine. So options are black, white, or I can choose a background color. My current background color here looks to be white, but we can always, you know, change that later, but white is fine. Okay, so create that and you should see kind of a long, thinner, I guess, block there. And your rock too is still open. So we want to just borrow this. Again, remember Control A is kind of one of those windows, select all, Control C to copy it. If I move into my untitled and Control V, I paste it, it's way too big. And again, I'm moving from an image size, a lot bigger document. So the 1600 is, you know, close in width. The height is about half. So that's why this is coming in quite large. It is at 72 pixels per inch, so that's kind of similar. So what we need to do is make this smaller, and we can do that again. Remember, edit and then free transform. And you just want to click and drag. So the shift key, it should automatically be helping you out with proportion.
I said you could not leave the command with scratch disk.
I'll come and look at that. Because the scratch discs are full. Okay.
Okay.
Let's save this. Okay, just so we don't lose it. Okay, custom. Oh, 6, we want pixels. That might be. There we go. Yeah, be sure that you're doing pixels as far as the 1600 by the 800. Otherwise, it might try to go into the other room. Yeah, it may. I think we've been looking at inches back and forth between inches and pixels, and we might have just left it there. Maybe last time. It might. So go back here again. Do a file save. Just to make sure. Oh, okay. Do a Control A, Control C, and then did you already paste it into here? Okay, Control V. Okay, then I think you can do your edit, retransform. Yep. Okay. Okay. Oh. I think we want, I would say, brush size. So if I go here and say Alt, and then I get a target and click, then release, and then you can come over and, yeah, it is, oh, darken. One normal. Oh, that's why. It may have been left on that, I wonder. Sure it's I think it's, doesn't seem like it's better now. It looks like it's, yeah, so the blending modes, that's another issue too. Up at the top, it has mode, normal, opacity, and flow 100%. If your blending mode, which is mode, is set at something other than normal, it may be trying to blend mode, whatever the setting is. Haley had darken, so it's trying to darken around it. Yeah.
So I'm trying to get this to the size here.
Yep, and that's exactly right. So then we'll go edit and then free transform. Yep, and then you just shrink it down. Yep, edit, free transform, and then it's not working. Okay. Okay, so you're there, Control A, you got it all selected, and then you did a Control C. Okay, let's go back and just. Oh, I bet you this is inches. So, because that's really little. So, let's close that down. And go to File New. And, I think you'll be okay now. That's in there. Yep, and then paste it. Yep, and then edit free transform. I think yours might have been similar to Brandon's in that it was left at inches at some point a long time ago, whatever we did last. Then I think we should be able to push it down. Yeah. And then pick up and move it around to where you want it. Yep, so we'll go here and then go to edit and then free transform. And then you'll just have to click and drag it smaller, pick it up on the ground. Yeah, it comes in larger. Yep, and then I would do 1600 by 800. Yeah, because otherwise it's small and then we won't be able to put more in. Then paste. Yep, so hit Control A, size. And document. And then it comes in large. Okay, so then edit, retransform. And then you'll just grab a corner. So it proportionately sizes it down and then just pick it up. So size it down and then just pick it up so that it's kind of in this right corner. So it's filling quite a bit of the screen there. We may end up putting stuff over the top of it a little bit, but it's on that right-hand side. And then you can just enter key when you're happy with where it's at and where it's sized. And okay. Oh, you just have a transparent layer, which is okay. So you were able to copy and paste it in here?
The picture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, and then you can, with your four-headed arrow, yep, and then you grab that four-headed arrow. And then just pick it up and move it so that we can see most of the document. Yeah. Oh, so you're putting it in. Yeah, so let's go to that one. Sorry. Okay, and then do it, and let's actually close this one down. So I think the size is we want to have it longer, wider. Yep, no. So then do a file new. Yep, and then, so let's go here and do 1600. And then by 800. And then there's your white, so you're good to go. Yep, and then create. So then you can Control V to paste it in here. Because I think you probably have it on your clipboard still. Yep, and then you can go to Edit and then Retransform. And then you can just size it down. Yep, just like that, and it'll proportionately size it down, and then you'll probably have to pick it up a little bit, size it down. So you're going to place it, pick it up, size it down to look like, sort of kind of like that one. Yep. Mm-hmm. And again, we're just kind of creating a little bit of a collage. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
I think it unproportionately squished it in. So let's go ahead and trash can that layer. And you can just trash it to the garbage. So you probably still have that selected. So do your Control Control C. And then we move into the untitled. And then Control V. Okay. And then go to Edit, Retransform. And then I think just on the corner, without any, and size it down, it should be okay. And yours, and we can add to your canvas. So I think you have an 800, maybe let's go to image canvas size. Oh, and you might have to set that for now. And then go to image and then canvas size. And let's go to pixels. And let's do 1600 by 1500. Or 800. Yeah, you're right. 1600. And then height of 800. And then okay. Okay, then go to Edit, Retransform. And then continue to size that down and fit it there. Yeah. Okay, and then remember when you get the size to where you're happy with it, if you have the sizing handles still around the outsides, you need to enter key to accept your transformation. Okay, so for example, if I click on that and then select transform, whenever you see the sizing handles, So sometimes you get to where you want to do a new task and it won't let you do anything. And it still thinks that I want to resize, and that happens with other tools within this program too. If you're kind of in the middle of a tool and then you switch gears but don't complete this task, it won't move forward. So does that make sense? So I can't really do, other than resizing, I can't really do a whole lot else until I accept, then it's okay. And remember, Control D gets rid of the marching ants, roving dots, whatever you want to call them.
Your, to say it again, does your mouse give you like a black part when you press?
No, yeah. And then getting out of tools. So this program, if you escape key, sometimes if you're in the middle of a tool, this tool used to do it a lot, the polygonal, and it doesn't, I think they fixed it. It actually used to like shoot all over the place. It would kind of go crazy. I don't know why it did, but you could hit escape key and then get out of that key. The mouse is at, yeah. Anyway, whatever, it's way better than it used to be. But even if you try to wrap you're wrapping a selection and it just turns out bad and you just want to get away from the whole thing, escape key on your keyboard just kind of cancels what you're doing. So that's good to know. And then moving tools, again, sometimes if there's issues with tools, I oftentimes go back to the move tool. That's your four-headed arrow, and that kind of seems to set things at ease too. So every now and then programs give you issues, and there are some things to help us out. Okay, let's go back to Moodle. And a couple other things that I want to do. So let's go to Red Eye image. And we just want to go ahead and open it. So I want to probably show in folder. Remember how they open in Photo Viewer, not Photoshop. So I can copy that and paste it into my document area and then open it from there. And we may have already done that. And then remember to open with Photoshop. So you just want to open Red Eye in Photoshop. And for those of you that had class with me like a semester or two ago, you probably have worked with the same file, but it works really good. I have my niece's teeth. This is kind of another funny story. So I borrowed her teeth to do the same tool. It was using the Dodge tool. And I didn't ask her if I could borrow her teeth. She was not pictured anywhere. It was just her teeth. But one of her friends was in my class and she goes, "Is that Stacy's teeth?" I said, "Yeah, it is. But don't tell her." So now I've told her I don't use her teeth anymore. But it was kind of funny. So I have asked my daughter if I can use her image. But these are from her and her friends when they were like 12. So this is many, many, many years ago. This one's my daughter, in case you haven't figured that out. Red Eye tools. So Red Eye with the camera technology and even our cell phone technology, Red Eye doesn't occur that much anymore. I do find that Red Eye occurs with animals because they have, the really big irises or, the pupils, the black part. So you may have, if you take a lot of pictures with animals, especially close-ups, you still may have some issues with that. But you may have old images. Maybe you're putting together a family album and you've got some red eye issues. And they do occur every now and again. But there's a really sweet tool in Photoshop that really takes care of that. And it's called the Red Eye tool. And I would go ahead and zoom in if you do a Control+ on this. So the Red Eye tool has a little eyeball and it has a plus. And the deal is you just click and drag around the whole, so kind of a big square around the eye. And it just automatically in like not even a second fixes it. And it even does the ones that are really red. It's just an amazing tool.
What if you don't have
You might have to click and hold. So even when you click and hold, you don't have the tool?
I don't have like
Yeah, I don't either.
Click and hold on the Band-Aid tool. Yeah, click and hold on the Band-Aid tool. It may look like a
Oh,
Band-Aid. Do you see that? Yeah, it's, I know it's hard to see which tool I'm on up there because it's so small. And you'll want to go to, we may have already gotten them. Let's go to the folder. Is this the same? Yeah, it's the same. Let's go there. We might have downloaded those. Documents. Oh, I don't think we did. Okay, so we'll go back here. It's in the previous week, I think. I'll go check the dates on that. So it's in, my goodness, that's a long week. October 7 through 13. And we'll end up needing to download some other ones too. So, but yep, Red Eye. And then be sure to view in folder. And then you can either right mouse to open from there or copy and paste it into documents and then open from there. And then the right mouse needs to be open with Photoshop because otherwise it opens the photo viewer. Yep, so open with. All right, so back to Photoshop. Anyway, so there's other tools that we'll use here. The Red Eye tool is really great for that. And again, it's just, you know, click and drag. And sometimes if I've had where it only works like partially, and if you just do one more click and drag around the eye, it fixes it. So really amazing tool. Okay, so other tools, and again, it could be lighting, it could be a lamp. I mean, you know, whatever it is, but there might be shiny spots. There could be dark circles under eyes. There could be a pimple. There could be all sorts of things that for whatever reason you need to clean up on complexion, skin tones and such. And there's a couple of tools, the healing brush tool and the spot healing tool. The spot healing tool is kind of a combination of tools. So we'll start with that one. And sometimes it works great and other times it really doesn't work so great. So that's the very top tool. So it should look like a Band-Aid with dots around it. Okay, so if you click and hold on that, again with my columns there, it's on the right side, the fourth tool down, and it's the top one and it says Spot Healing Brush Tool. Okay, so this is a combination and it showed you the dots. So the first thing we need to do, we'll come back to that one in just a second. The first thing we need to do is actually draw a spot that we want to heal. Okay, so I want you to actually grab, and you can use, if you needed a square to heal or a round shape to heal, a polygon. I mean, there's all sorts of things, so you can combine those same tools. We're just going to simply click and drag an area. So choose the lasso tool. It is a new selection in case it, you know, wants to do something different. And then let's go ahead and do a 0% or a 0 pixel feather. So we'll leave it at that. And this may or may not work real great, but let's say we want to try to fix, so we've got, you know, kind of a dark circle under her eye. We've got bright white, so it's just really uneven skin tones. And we'll go ahead and kind of click and drag an area around, and maybe, you know, we'll just test it and see. So maybe that's the area I want to try to fix. So I'm circling around an area that I want to fix. So try to get something kind of similar to that. Then I want to click my Spot Healing Brush tool. And the same thing, I'm going to have a pixel size and a softness or hardness to the brush. I think 19's a little bit big in this case, so I might go down just a little bit. Not a lot maybe, but a little bit. And skin tones are really blended, so I think I want to probably look at maybe a less hard brush, so maybe, you know, in the 60s, something like that. And we'll just let, you know, normal, content aware, da 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 da. So what it's going to try to do is to try to, with pixels selected in that whole area, so that's the content aware, and the texture and the proximity match. It's going to try to blend those colors and pixels all together. And it's going to be held within the line that I designated, my spot healing. So you can see I can't even go out of that line, okay? And the idea is here, and again, will it work? We don't really know. Sometimes this works great, sometimes it does not. Click and drag around that area. Okay, what's it doing right here? Actually, the whole thing. Can you tell? It's trying to copy her eyeball. Okay, so that tool probably, I'm going to Control Z that. But for, if I was trying to blend, and maybe if I did a smaller area, that still isn't really doing a great job. The more I do it, no. So in one instance, it kind of helped a little bit. I'm still going to have to go back and correct that. So because other pixels are around, the other thing is I actually do have her picture on a black background. So that's kind of abnormal, but that actually is black. So that might be part of it too. But the spot healing tool I think would work if there was a larger area of pixels and it surrounding it. But anyway, so Control D to deselect that. There's a similar one, so the healing brush tool, you know how you've been used to with the rock tool, the clone stamp, this is exactly the same. So choose the healing brush tool. Again, I'm gonna use kind of a similar brush size and hardness. So the idea here is that I find a skin tone that I kind of want to copy and I click. So you Alt key on your keyboard, click, and then, you know, draw, click and drag around it. So Alt click, and again, this one might not be, and you can kind of keep trying to smooth it, but I don't know that this is probably the greatest tool either in this case. You'll find something that you may not think would work very well is a plain old brush tool. Actually might be our best bet. And we'll do that one next. So there still is, it's kind of streaky here. So not the best. And you can maybe try to get rid of some of that just by clicking, you know, in maybe single clicks to try to get rid of that. That's maybe a little bit better. But you don't want to also get rid of detail. And I could do the same thing here, but we'll choose a different tool. Okay, oddly enough, the brush tool works pretty good for some things. So the brush tool actually looks like a paintbrush. Okay, so choose that one. And we want to brush, so again, oddly enough, I'm going to brush over the top a little bit of the shiny part, but I don't want to brush with the color blue that I've currently selected. I want to brush with a color that's really close to that area. So I'm going to set my brush color by clicking foreground. And then remember, you get an eyedropper. So you could try to find something by scrolling, but that's way too hard. So the eyedropper, and you just want to click a color. And by the way, keep clicking around. So there's a big difference in skin tones. So that middle section's almost white. There's more pink, I'd say, on the right-hand side than maybe on the left-hand side. Mm-hmm.
How do you that color thing up?
So we want to go to the brush tool. So I'll go ahead and cancel what I did. So the brush tool is on my left column. It looks like a paintbrush. Okay. And yep, choose that one. And then the foreground color, I currently have blue. You may have black or something else. So it's this first front facing box. Pick that, and then you'll get, as soon as, and you might need to pick up the box, kind of pull it out of the way. But as soon as you move your cursor, you'll get kind of some pink tones. Okay, so pick something that's semi-close to the area that you want to correct. And then say okay to that. And I want to have, again, the brush size needs to be something that's reasonable for me to paint with. Currently, I have a 2-pixel brush. That must have been the last time I was here. Not a good idea. So I need to bring up that brush size, and probably, I'm guessing in the 20 range, something like that. Again, kind of ballpark. And hardness, I would say it's probably, you know, skin tones are really soft. So I would probably go in, you know, around 50%-ish. And then the other thing here, so I'm going to show you at 100% opacity and 100% flow. So if I actually click and drag, and I'll be really, so you'll see what I'm doing there, and I'll Control Z this. I don't want to paint that pink color on at 100% opacity because then it looks like I just painted a color on. So I'm going to Control Z that. What I want to do is drop that opacity back and maybe even in the 30s. I'd rather start low than get too much, and then you kind of just click and drag a little bit. And I want to keep the highlights, but I'm just removing it a little bit. I can do the same thing with, you know, right above the nose. And in fact, maybe I could even, and I might have to pick a better color, but I even might be able to paint over some of these other skin tones to smooth them out. And I may need to, you know, maybe borrow a different color of pink. And I might even want to go back a little bit on my opacity because this is a little darker, and kind of click and drag around. So you want to keep highlights, but maybe smooth them out. All right. Then let's zoom in one more time. So do a Control+ and make sure that you can see both eyeballs, but we're going to work on the left-hand side. So again, I'm at 300%. It's probably not, again, this was my old camera. They were in the basement. It wasn't a great image. But if this is all I need to have that I have to work with, I need to do my best with it. So there are some things that you can do to kind of bring out some highlights. So everything looks a little bit dull, I would say. Her eyes don't seem to be bright. And there's, again, a couple of things we can do. So on, there's a couple of tools. There's kind of one that looks like, it looks to me like a hand, but I think it's a burning tool from like industry. But to me, it looks like it's a hand that's grabbing. Another one that you may possibly see looks like to me a lollipop, which is the dodge tool. And then there's a sponge. And then we'll also deal with, there's a blur, sharpen, and smudge. So these are the other tools we'll work with here. The dodge tool, again, let's kind of try to work with it. We'll see what we think. And click the one that kind of looks like a lollipop again. And my brush size needs to be changed. What I want to do here, and the whites of her eyes don't look too unwhite, but if you've got somebody that either they're really tired and they've got red eyes maybe a little bit, or the lighting's bad and they have a touch of yellow and it just doesn't look good. So you can do some things to kind of fix that a little bit too. So my brush size needs to be able to fit inside the white part. So I need that to be quite small. So I might be in the, 6 pixel range, maybe 5, something like that. And I would say 0% hardness probably here too. And again, exposure default, and it's going to lighten mid-tones. So we'll just let the defaults go here and see what happens. You don't need much. But what you'll do is just a tiny little click and drag, and especially maybe in the areas that you feel are darkest. And all it does, in fact, don't go down too far. I think I did. Yeah, so make sure you're kind of careful in where you're dodging, but you're just a tiny little lightening. Again, leave detail, but a tiny little bit. Okay, so that already looks a touch brighter. So that is your dodge tool. And the brush tool can be used the same way. In fact, before the dodge and the burn tools, back in the old Photoshop days, people just used brush tools and they changed the opacity just like we did with the pink. Okay, so let's go to the burn tool. And this one, so I feel like the eye part could be a little bit brighter, especially a border around the eye just to give them a little definition. So I do want a tiny little brush. So I'm going to be going with a 2. Okay, and I can burn, if I were using a brush tool, I could actually pick a color that was near that area. But the cool thing with the burn tool is that it takes the color that's there and just deepens it a little bit. So I don't even have to pick a color. So I can just kind of click and drag around that edge, and it helps me out. And you can keep doing more, less, so whatever you think looks natural. Again, you're not changing someone. You just may be enhancing. Okay, does that kind of help? Then, and you can use the smudge tool. This one's kind of fun. You know the green screen, I've talked a lot about that. We kind of did something similar with the blue sky. You know how you can select the blue sky and then remove it easily, and we were left with the clock tower. That a lot of times is used for human beings and animals and things with hair. So have you ever seen a copy of a person that looks like it was totally cut out and like their hair is missing and it's just kind of weird looking? So sometimes you can paint hair back in, and that's really great with people, with animals. We'll do it here with a little bit of eyelashes. So the smudge tool can be used, again, tiny little brush. I could go to 1, I could go to 2, and this just uses the color that's there. And I'm just going to try to elongate the eyelashes just a little bit. So it uses the current color that's there. I can do the same thing with the bottom. I mean, I could go and paint them in if I wanted to. So lots of options, you know, the brush tools, plain old brush tool. And then what you'd want to do is view this at 100%. So your goal is, and you know, is there a huge difference between the left side and the right side? I think the left side looks brighter, but we didn't do a lot of change. We didn't change the person. We just did a little bit to make it brighter, to make it stand out. And then again, smoothing out the skin tones a little bit. And you'll just get better and better. You'll see opportunities. Okay, so then let's do a Control A and a Control C. And we're going to move that into our untitled. Control V. And it's just kind of painted on there. And we probably should make it a little bit smaller. So we'll free transform it, make it smaller. We can probably put it at that maybe top right-hand side so that I can see what you did below. If you want to do some fun little rotation, you can sure do that. Whatever you want to do. So I want to be able to see that you removed the stick, that you removed the canvas stuff, and that you changed the eyes, use the red eye tool. Is there questions on spot healing, healing brush, red eye? Red eye, super simple, really effective. Spot healing does work good in other instances, I think, and again, you corral the area that you want to correct. And then it's supposed to help you with content awareness of the other pixels, smooth it out for you. In this case, I think the eye and the black were too close together and didn't work great. Healing brush tool works a lot like that clone stamp tool. So you're probably getting good at that one now. Okay, another couple of files that I want you to grab. The bowfin drain and rust. And I think you've probably, if you haven't put them in your documents, you want to go ahead and do that and then open both of them. So we want to open the drain from Pearl Harbor, and then we want to open rust. Mm-hmm.
Did you do
So let's go to view 100%. So, or, yeah. Yeah, you should have. Okay, so you want to put, so you want that to go onto the other one.
Okay.
So we can undo that. So you can do a Control A on that one. And then a Control C. And then you'll go to your larger one there in the middle. And then Control V there. And it's a little bit big, so I would go to Edit Free Transform.
I was trying to go through
There, yeah. And then same Free Transform. And then just make it smaller. Yep. And then you might just want to throw it over there somewhere. Okay, so the University of Montana, I took a class years ago that it was a photography class. It was kind of fun, but the University of Montana has what's called a boneyard, and there's old golf carts, rusted out vehicles. There's just stuff. There's stuff that's been left out for decades. So it's really fun because that's just a picture of, I think, I don't know if it was a vehicle or whatever, but it's pretty cool, just the colors and the swirling and bubbling. And so things like that can be used for other purposes. And then I was lucky enough years ago to go to Hawaii. And has anybody been in the USS Bowfin in Hawaii? Okay, so the whole Pearl Harbor thing is amazing anyway, but to go into a submarine, you really get an appreciation for its close quarters, and it's small, and you're under thousands, hundreds of feet of water, and oh boy, I don't know, those are tough men and women that are down there. Anyway, for whatever reason, I took a picture of the drain. I don't know why, but anyway, so if you wanted, maybe you're open for business. I don't know, maybe it's a mechanical shop or you're advertising that you're open, and for some reason you want to use parts of this image. So our goal is to take this little guy and put it into the rust image, and then we're going to do some blending modes. And you've done some practice. Have we done practice with blending modes? No, we didn't do. Okay, so you'll do some of that. Some of you may have already worked with blending modes, but they're really fun because you can create something that's very unique. And especially when you start layering things like rust and, you know, mechanical things and clock wheels, and you see a lot of that. So it's pretty fun. Okay, if I wanted to select out this drain, and I'm not gonna, if I was really picky, I may want to get rid of all this inner workings. I'm not going to make you do that. So what I'm looking for is the drain handle itself. What tool would you start with? All of our selection tools, which one do you think would be best? The lasso, yep, so there's the plane and then there's the magnetic. And the deal with the magnetic is there has to be high contrast, and there might be some high contrast in some areas, but right, like here's high contrast. I'm afraid of in some of the areas it's not going to be a very clean line. What shape is that in general? Kind of round, okay? So maybe we start, I think we're going to come back to the lasso, you're right with that, but I think we start with something that's maybe round to begin with and see if it's going to work. So let's try first the elliptical. I do kind of want a clean selection, so let's try the 0 pixel feather. Okay, that adds to our challenge a little bit, but let's do that. I want to start with a brand new selection, so it probably would, you know, as soon as we start clicking and dragging, it would get back to that anyway, but we want a brand new selection. And then just like you've done in the past, click and drag what might be an okie dokie circle there. You know it's not going to be perfect. A round circle, remember, is shift key if you have to constrain it. I don't think that that's, because I was on it, but if I was slightly to the left or slightly to the right, it isn't going to be perfect circle, but it's close. Okay, now that I have a circle, how do I make this even better? Do you remember? How do I get my sizing handles back? How do I skew that selection? Remember, we did that with the clock tower face, the clock itself. But we need to get our selections, so we can go back to select. So you're right with the control key. Yep, and you could be with the shortcuts, but select. So we need to get our selection back. So select, transform selection. And you can turn on or off the transform tools, by the way. You might have noticed that on the control palette. I usually leave them off because it's so easy to, once you kind of have a selection and they're always on, you click and drag by accident and not good. I can up arrow, over arrow, so you can do just the tiny little arrows just to see if you're kind of close to begin with, and then do a little bit here and there. Then you may have to start skewing things in just a little bit. So work with it to where you feel like the circle itself, and I've got this lower right hand side, I feel like that's where I need to skew it a little bit. So you're going to get to where you think the circle part of your selection looks good. And then we're going to have to deal with the rest of it. So I think mine looks pretty good. When I'm happy with just the circle part, I'm going to enter key to accept that. Then we need to add to our selection. So because these little knobs, whatever they are there, we need to add to those. So that is that second box to add to our selection. So be sure that you keep the first box. We're happy with that, but we need to click that second tool, add to my selection. Then go back to your lasso, and you can try the lasso, you can try the magnetic lasso tool. I will try the magnetic on screen for you. I've found, because I've done this a number of times, it doesn't do a good job. And I think there's my escape, it kind of was whacking out there, but I think it's because the colors are so similar in some areas. It would be maybe okay over here, and then it kind of blends a little bit. I'm going to Control Z that. So I hate to tell you this, but I think you do have to use the plain old lasso tool. And that one, I know that's hard to control, but it is start within your circle. Again, I'm adding to my selection, second box, should see a plus sign on my lasso. I start inside the circle, and you can always edit, undo, come back, but then I'm just clicking, dragging as best I can. And all I have to do is end inside that circle again. So you just kind of have to do left side inside circle, wrap down to right side inside circle. So do that all the way through. You could. You could. I'm not very good with the pen tool. We should, if you're good with it, we should have you do a demonstration. Yeah, the pen tool, and you can bend it. Yeah, which we don't. Yeah, no, and that's probably more an Illustrator, isn't it? More prevalent in Illustrator. And these are circular. It's possible that you could just keep kind of adding circles. That might be workable too. I mean, there's other ways to do it that might be even cleaner than what we just did, but I think we're pretty close. Okay, so do you feel like you have a decent selection? You mean just a little bit? So there's a couple of things you can do. I can go to select. Transform lets me click and drag down the whole thing, which I'm going to Control Z to undo. But there's another one. If you kind of feel like you're really good with the selection, the shape of it, you can go to select, and there's a modify that lets you contract just a little bit, like I can contract 3 pixels or 2 pixels. Does that help? Yeah. Or expand, you know, if you feel like you're a little bit on the small side. Yeah, so just a little bit is workable with that too. And that's again, select, modify. Okay, so if you're happy with this, we want to copy it, Control C, we've got our selection already. And by the way, I'm going to go to image size just to check this out. So this was with my better camera, and I've got, this is pretty big. It's 4,300 pixels by 3,200 pixels at 180 pixels per inch resolution. So that's pretty good detail. If I move into rust, so I'll cancel that, move into rust, and image size here. So again, I probably had my better camera here too, but I try to take a picture of something quite small also. So I've got a high resolution, but it's a smaller image. So we're going to have quite large image at a little more than half the resolution coming in here. So I expect that my drain is probably going to be bigger than this, wouldn't you think, when I bring it in? Okay, so let's cancel that. So again, I'm just going to paste. I can Control V, edit paste. And are you sure you want to convert? Yep, okay. And you can see the difference. So it's a quite large drain. And again, I can get my move tool out, and you know, if I only wanted to see open, I could, you know, squishy it down and maybe just see open. If that's all I want, I can rotate it. So there's a lot of things that you can do with images. I do want this one to be, I want to see the whole drain. So your goal is, and again, where you start is up to you, but I do want to make it smaller. I'm going to edit, and again, free transform. I do want it to be proportionate, which is by default, and I want it to fit inside that rust window. So size it, and again, you can just kind of click and drag it around to where you like it. And then you can kind of see, and I'll move mine away so you can see where the rust is. I'm going to end up blending these two together. So place the drain, and I'll let you decide where that's going to be, but place the drain so that it's kind of on top of the rusty color that you like. So whether it's the texture, the colors, the tones, and then you can also rotate it. So you might find that you want open to be more prominent, and maybe you want to cover up, you know, you want some of the, whatever that shape is and coloring, you might want that to be on the drain itself, but maybe you want open to be at top rather than at the bottom. So go ahead and rotate it. Again, rotating is with your corner curling arrows, and sizing is with corner handle, click drag down, pretty easy to do. And you can make it, you know, exactly perpendicular up and down if you want, rotate it a little bit, pick it up, move it around, wherever you think you're happy with that image. And size it up slightly if you feel like you've got a little room. And then enter key when you think you're happy with it. So then the fun part, so this is blending modes are really fun in this particular example here. So both layers are visible, background layer and my normal layer. And if I go ahead and start changing my blending modes, you'll see now dissolve doesn't really do anything. But when we start moving through, so I want you to pick what you're happy with, but move through each one. And again, they're kind of clumped, so the darkened ones are blocked together, the lightened ones are blocked together, the overlay ones are blocked together. So kind of move through and you can get a feel for what it looks like. And what you want attention to be called to. So overlay, I see a whole lot more of the color coming through, less of the open, but if you like that tone. hard light, I see way more open, and it kind of comes off the page a little bit, I feel like. So again, I think whatever you choose. Difference, exclusion, hue doesn't really show much, nor does that one. Luminosity is more kind of the grayscale, which that drain is grayscale, and the back wouldn't be grayscale. Okay, did you find something you like? Okay, so then, I mean, you can do some more combining here. So whatever you like. And by the way, you still have the ability to change opacity on that. So if you're happy with it, but you really like the decrease in opacity, you can do that. You can do that later. But there's also some kind of fun effects. So let's go to layer 1 and do the FX button. And go to bevel and emboss. And you may need to move your box out of the way just a little bit, and that's again just picking that up and moving it out of the way. Each one of these tools are turned on or off.
Where's the FX?
It's way at the bottom, right here.
Oh, I see.
So you want to be on the drain layer, and then FX should be available. And then the first one we went to was blending modes, or bevel and emboss. So there's, every one of these tools has default colors, default values, and I can turn them on or off. If I turn stroke on, I can turn it on or off, and I'm using whatever the defaults are, but I can't change it unless I go to that layer, if that makes sense. So if I did want to change stroke to several pixels wide, I have to be on that layer. Okay. I don't really care for stroke on there, but maybe I like bevel and emboss. I can change to emboss only. I can change to pillow emboss, to stroke emboss, outer bevel. I think inner bevel was the one that I selected that probably works first. I can change the depth. There's all sorts of things you can change. We'll work with those here in just with another project, but that's kind of fun because it actually jumps out a little bit more at you. So let's just say okay to that. And again, I could get rid of everything else on that back side. So if you want to, so we can try this. So we can duplicate the background. If I click on the background, I can say duplicate layer. And background copy, yep, that's okay. And then I want to turn off the real background. See how there's a difference between background copy, it's the image, and then the background is locked. Okay, backgrounds can't have transparency. Okay, so I'm going to turn off that visibility eyeball. So if what I want to do is select everything outside of the ring, the drain handle, I need to control click on the tiny little thumbnail of the drain handle, and that is the tiny little thumbnail. So that's right on the drain itself, right on the layers panel. And it reselects what you worked so hard to select. And then do you remember with the clock tower how we inverted that selection? So if I inverse the selection, now I'm selecting everything outside of it. And then if I press delete key, I'm on the background copy layer. So I've just got rid of all the stuff on the background. Okay, now I only have that cool picture of the drain. And then I can move that whole thing. And in fact, I can merge visible, which are only the eyeballs. I can flatten this whole thing, which flatten it, I would change it probably in this case because I have transparency. I'd want to save it as either a GIF or a PNG, most likely a PNG, and most likely even a PNG 24 to preserve that transparency. If I save this as a JPEG, it would have a white background. JPEGs have to have color. That's just how they are, have to have color. Anyway, we're not going to merge the visible. In fact, I'm going to undo what I just did. But that's kind of fun, huh? Okay, so Control Z. Let's go ahead and Control Z so that everything's there. Control D to deselect. And then I want to Control A to select my whole thing. Remember that Windows deal? Control A, Control C, because I want to copy it. And then I want to move it to that big image. So that's my untitled still. Hopefully you have that. Does everybody have their untitled still? Okay. So then we're going to Control V to paste it in here. Control V. Oh, you know what it did? So Control Z, undo. What that's doing, because it's, so we actually are going to have to flatten this. We don't have to save it in a flattened version, but we're going to have to merge the visible because it's only taking one layer. So let's go ahead and move to the top layer, which is the drain. And just for now, let's go ahead and merge down means I'm going to merge everything that's from here down and visible. Merge visible is the eyeballs are on. Okay, so I'm going to merge my visible. Now it's one. Now with my Control A, I'm already selecting it. I can Control C, move into my untitled, Control V, and I've got my drain. Then I want to size it just like we've been doing. Transform it. I want to fit the whole thing in here, and I think it pretty much fits. Overlaps maybe a hair on the rock, but not by much. And I probably have a couple of minutes to go into Lake North, but let's save this. So there's a larger project, the final project for this, that will be our blending, final blending, and we'll paste it again on here. So it's kind of the rest or the ending part of our collage. But right now, let's go ahead and do a file save as. And if you sit at the same computer every day, I think it's okay to save it to that computer, but if you want to back it up on a USB and you have one, that would be okay too. But we're going to save it to your computer. And I would say that this is probably healing, blending, what else have we done? We've done some selections, more of the healing tools really, clone. So it's kind of a combination of our healing tools, our blending modes, and our clone stamp. Also we're going to do one more, unless you've saved it already, that's okay. I'm going to do actually type mask. So we can call it, because that's going to be what we'll do on Thursday. So healing, blending, clone, type mask. It's a whole bunch of tools just rolled into one here. And then save that. Yep, we can maximize compatibility. That's between all the Adobe apps. And actually, I think I'll not do any more images here. You may have noticed on this week, has anybody been on Moodle a little bit? Okay. So there is a midterm that's due Sunday, October 27th by midnight. Okay, there's two portions to it, and you can do this, I would suggest you do this at a computer that has the Adobe products. You want to have access to InDesign, and you want to have access to Photoshop. Okay, I don't have class time available for it, so it's going to have to be outside of class, but you have from now until Sunday midnight to do them, okay? This one, so the quiz, it's 40 points but 20 questions, so it's not a great deal of questions, but they do have to do with InDesign and Photoshop, so you are going to want to be able to open maybe those programs. But there's 20 points, and I think I've given you 90 minutes to do those, so I think there's a timed, unless you have a time removal or whatever. And see me, if you have not seen me about removing time with your letter, please see me on that. Or if you need a quiet room, Betsy downstairs, remember in the Learning Center, she has individual computers that are inside rooms all by themselves if you need that quiet time. And I think every computer down there has the Adobe products. That's what I was told. So I think you'd be okay down there. Anytime this lab is open, you're free to come in and use this lab. And then the other one is just you're going to evaluate, and there's a document that's inside here that you can open, and that's contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. So that's what it really isn't. It's really good stuff, but that's my name of the file. And you're just going to evaluate. I'll open that. In terms of, so I'll show you the document in just a minute. Each one of these, you're going to record the page number and where on the page you located the principle of contrast. So you can just type that in there, super easy, super quick. Describe the specific evidence or technique employed in the appearance. So what is it that's demonstrating contrast? What are you finding on that page in that location? And then within design, so how did they do that? What tools did they use to do that? Okay, and I'm looking for one example of contrast, one example of repetition, one of alignment, and one in proximity. And then I'd like you to really review it, and in your judgment, I want you to find what you think could be a potential weakness. It could be a weakness that you see, or it could be a potential weakness depending upon what where this article is displayed. Okay. The article itself, I'll go back again, and I just want to also let you know that I scanned it, and any distortion is caused by my scanning. Okay, so that's not the article. It's because I was laying it down. But you know, if you see a weakness here, so there's all sorts of examples of contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. But I also would like you to look for what you think either is a weakness or could potentially be a weakness anywhere in this publication. Okay? So 20 of your points are evaluation. That you could do at home. You don't, well, you might need to know where, I guess, the tools are. So that might be helpful. This one, I would be sure that you have access to the programs, to the applications. Okay, does anybody see a challenge to that? It's Tuesday to Sunday. Okay, nobody's gone on business or, all right. And then production portion, I'm not sure I'll have an in-class deal or if it's just gonna be an assignment, like a regular assignment that we'll do. So anyway, that's the rest of this week. On Thursday, we'll continue, and Photoshop will be done on Thursday. If there is any time in class, I probably would give it to you for working on your, probably the evaluation portion, because I hate to have you open. You get one entry, remember, for a test. So I'd hate to have you enter into that and then you run out of time. All right. Any questions?